Is that supposed to be green? I can hear it.
Yours is, are they supposed to be red?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's on. Okay. We are calling this meeting to order. And the first item of business is the minutes for the previous meeting. Y'all had a chance to look at those.
Well, if I were nitpicking, I would put an ED at the end of review in these 5 places here.
Ah, gotcha. I can.
Yeah,
We'll fix that.
that's it for me.
Okay.
Everything else is good.
All right. Max?
Yeah, they look fine.
Okay. All right. Minutes are approved as presented with those edits. Let's go on to absentee ballot canvassing and remake procedures. Jennifer?
Okay. So, for our county, and I think in Benton County, we may be one of only 2 counties with actually a 2-sheet ballot,
Oh,
which is part of this process for us.
okay.
So basically, the goal is how do we keep straight which ballots are the original ballots, which ballots are the remake ballots, especially because at some point we may have to actually be printing the absentee traditional ballot. So we went ahead and got stamps because they'll just be useful for us for all elections. And so basically, when we first start out canvassing, as they open up the ballots, the canvasser will make sure that sheet 1 and sheet 2 is there.
Okay.
If sheet 1 is missing, then they'll put sheet 2 in a pile. If sheet 2 is missing, that will go in a separate pile as well. And so we'll be balancing that number because they'll start out with a stack of 50 and then they'll need to make sure they've got, 50 total ballots, complete sets. That first ballots that then are set aside in stacks 1 and 2, we'll go ahead and stamp with the with this original stamp, so we know that that's a ballot we're going to have to remake.
Before you ever do anything else?
Before we ever do anything else. So we've already set that aside as a ballot that we're going to have to remake. So we'll have a couple of options when we do remake the ballots. One, if it's missing page 2, we can go ahead and we could reprint page 2 and read those in together. Or we could just take the whole ballot and remake it on the express vote ballots, and that page 2, issue 4, would just be an undervote. And so my vote would always be to use the express vote ballot rather than printing ballots, because the express vote ballot makes it very, very clear that this is a read-made ballot, and our express vote ballots have those pre-printed numbers on there.
That's the only place that we have those numbers
Yes.
is when we have
Yes.
a supply for reprint.
Yes. And so
Or remake.
right. And so those are only here in our office. So then we would stamp, write the ballot, the remake number on here, the reason why we're remaking it.
Good.
And whoever is the person who votes the ballot will sign, and then the commissioner or whoever is the second person to review will then sign under that. So this keeps keeps a tracking system for us. If when we eventually start to run the ballots through the machines, that's when it gets a little bit trickier. So if we run a ballot through the machine, and let's say for Boston, this Boston precinct, the DS200 takes the first sheet but rejects the second sheet, we will have to print a ballot.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Because you don't want to have to remake the whole thing.
You
Yeah.
can't, because the DS200 has
not gonna
already
give it-
accepted a
Yeah.
vote
Oh, the
cast.
first one and not the
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, got it, got it.
So
Yeah.
in that instance, we'll have the BOD printer here. We would print a ballot. We would tear the stub off of this ballot. We would stamp this one as the original, the one it rejected, staple the stub
Oh,
to
yeah.
this ballot, write the stub number here, and then we would run
Yeah.
this one through. Remakes will always be run through on separate DS200s so
Yeah.
that they're never mixed in with the ballots that were
Mm.
originally done. And so that would be our process
Okay.
for that. If it rejects page 1, then we would pull page 2 and we would remake it like this.
Because you haven't put page 2 in
Right.
yet.
Right, which is the vote cast.
Okay.
And so I think that that's going to be our best system to make sure that we're keeping accurate track of the ballots and clearly marking which ballots were the original, the reason why we're remaking it, and keeping track of who's done what.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to rematch this ballot to this ballot.
Oh, yeah.
But for these ballots, we won't unless we can handwrite the stub number on here if we wanted to, but since these would be run through a separate machine, we would be able to just keep those
Yeah.
separate, so.
How many absentee ballots do we have? My only question is, it seems like a great process. This thing
Yeah.
this stamp seems excellent.
Right.
Really organized
Yeah.
with the fields.
Yeah.
If we get into a situation where we have to remake a ton of those ballots on the express vote, how many do we have absentee ballots total
So-
going out?
Yeah, so we've sent out 543 absentee ballots.
Okay, that's not
It's
too
not
many.
terrible, but
Yeah.
it still isn't, I mean, and it is manageable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I was hoping she would say 12. You know, I'm always optimistic.
Is there any history of the percentage of absentee ballots that don't scan, or that we have problems?
Yeah, we do.
We do, just simply because of the folding problem. But even with that, out of when we did the
Yeah,
12,000,
Right.
I think we ended up remaking close to 1,000
That's what I
of
was
them.
thinking.
So maybe
10%?
10%. Some of those,
500, 10% would be 50.
Yeah.
Not too
Right.
bad.
That's not too bad.
No. Even if
And-
it was double
And that's
that.
manageable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah, manageable for sure.
the key will be for us to start reading in the absentee ballots earlier than
yeah.
waiting until 5 o'clock.
Right.
And when we read them in earlier, then we can start balancing and making sure we've got our stacks that are to be remade. To remake the ballots, if I see that this number of 543, I think realistically for absentee ballots, 2,000 is a typical
Right,
number for
right.
us. Maybe we'll get to that 2,000, but we'll have Patty's crew that comes in, and that's a crew of 6. We'll bring them in right around 5:30. We'll have them start the remake process as soon as they get here. They're a good, efficient crew. They're typically in charge of doing the remakes. The key is getting everything run in well in advance so that when Patty's crew gets here, they know exactly what we're
Right.
remaking, and we've already got the numbers balanced. So I would want to. We will start the canvassing at 9 o'clock on Tuesday, November 8th, and I would suspect we should be able to start reading in ballots around 10:30. And then that'll give us plenty of time to get ballots read in and then do an accurate count
Whatever
of which
happens
ones we have to
afterwards, yeah.
remake. If we see that we need to start remaking earlier, then we can make that adjustment because we'll have our canvassing
Sure,
crew here.
yeah.
We won't release the canvassing crew until we know for sure
Okay, good.
what it is. And so we can always use the canvassing crew to start remakes. Patty's crew, they work a full-time job, so they can't get
Right,
here
yeah.
any earlier.
Yeah.
But they're a good, efficient crew for us.
Well, it seems like a great process.
Yeah.
The key is just, as you know, is to stay organized
Yeah.
with it.
Well, and simply to be as, to apply as much caution in, making sure everything is in an orderly way, so there's no confusion.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna require your full attention.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll, Evelyn is typically in charge of the canvassing
Okay,
with my assistants.
Yeah.
So this process will go over with Evelyn, very detailed manner, but we'll be able to, I think, always thinking ahead,
Right.
we'll have a plan in place for
As
what
long
we
as
need
you've
to
got
do.
the process all worked out ahead
Yeah.
of time, I think it will go smoothly. But that's the key, is we don't want any glitches
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Unlike good planning, and you do
Yeah.
good planning.
Exactly,
So-
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think marking the ballots as
Mhm.
original when they first open them up,
Yeah.
when they're missing a
Yeah,
page,
yeah, yeah.
is the key
agree.
to doing that, because the worst thing would be is we didn't realize a page was missing until we started feeding them into the DS200. And so when they're doing the opening of the ballots, we're gonna have to be really
Yeah.
careful with that part
It's
of it as well.
training people very specifically
Yeah,
on how this
exactly.
process works. And
Yeah.
I think not having too many people involved in
Right.
the actual process
Mm-hmm.
of remaking them, because it's a little different than when we typically just have a one-page ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more people that get involved too, the easier it is for something to drop.
Yeah.
And mistakes get made, so, okay. Well, I think you've done a fine job on planning it out, and I know you'll implement it accordingly. I don't think we've got any need to suggest a motion to adopt this process, because it's gonna be potentially open to refinements between now and actually doing it on election day. But you can let us know if you find a wrinkle somewhere.
And we know we'll have, a set number of ballots we have to remake automatically, and those are the
Right,
military, the overseas ballots. So we know that that's already a separate set of ballots that we have to do as well.
Good point. Okay, well, it's coming close. What do we have, 30-some days? Okay, write-in candidate results and certification. Here we go.
Okay, so this is just so that you're aware, and this is a known problem with ES&S programming. Because we do have a two-sheet ballot, two-sheet ballots just kind of always mess up
it up.
everything.
Yep.
When we do certify our election results, we will only certify in the election reporting system just that basic number of write-in votes. It won't be broken out
Oh, good.
into the individual candidates, the ones that are certified. When we try and do a certification with the individual names, like the actual candidates who filed, it is looking for those names on that second sheet as well. So it's causing an error in the reporting system, and it creates what looks like a double vote, which it's not. It's just how it's looking for that second page. So when we do our final certification, in order to keep everything nice and clean and the way it is, we will actually export the file that shows the votes for, candidate A, candidate B, the ones that are just for like Wile E. Coyote and all of that. And we'll do like a supplemental addition to the certification with the actual number of votes for, like Elvis Presley, who's one of the write-in candidates, or for, I forget the other ones, but it'll show exactly how many votes, but it won't be in the official report that we run election night or for the election
It'll just be a
certification.
general write-in candidate, that's it.
Yes.
Okay.
And the state's aware of this, and so that is how we will end up doing our candidates' results and certification for it.
Question, Joe?
No, sounds good.
Okay, let's go on to item 4, the budget request. This is essentially to clean up what we have budgeted for 2022. So, interesting the way they've broken this down on 2 pages.
I could not, it would not let me manipulate it to
Wow.
print it. This
How
was
funny.
how I got it
Yeah.
from them, so I just printed it. But basically, we're asking for $2,000 more for fuel just because of the price of fuel, and that is a reimbursable expense.
yeah.
Fire and extended coverage is, we have to have that. And then for the software support management, which is our program, our own, because the bill was higher than expected this year. I did confirm with ES&S that for 2023, it will remain the same.
Good.
They will start looking at it, I guess, every 2 years to adjust for the number of registered voters that we have. But I have let Craig know at ES&S that we would need what you are thinking of charging us by June each year, so that when we are doing our budgeting, we can appropriately budget accordingly.
And if we had known this before, we would have probably put this in at half in 1 year and half in another. If what they're doing is, if they're gonna do this every 2 years.
Well, we get charged every year,
Oh, okay.
but they look
So it's not a one-time.
Yeah, we get charged every year for it. But they look at the number of registered voters every other year, because next year, we may just have one election. But I did have him note that we'll need this number every June
Good.
to be able to budget accordingly. But we also, had we known this in 2021, we would have budgeted accordingly.
But this is in addition to what we budgeted for?
What our budget
Yes.
is, yeah.
What's the
This,
total?
this would have
That we're
been
paying
It
a
was
shortage.
Yeah, I believe it was 20. Oh shoot, I don't want to. I don't have it
Yeah,
off the top of
don't
my
say
head.
Well,
But
14,000 that's a big increase,
yes,
but it may not be a big increase if it was $200,000
Yeah.
to begin with.
Oh, you mean
Yeah.
for ES&S?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it was.
I
in
think
the-
it was like $40,000 or something like. I
So
think
it's
we
40 to
were
30.
paying 30,000.
Well, that's like a 30%.
It is.
Yeah, it's
yes.
pretty huge.
That's pretty
But
big.
their excuse, as I understand it, was that they hadn't looked lately at our registered voter numbers.
Yeah, we had been underpaying for
So
at
whose
least
fault
4
is that?
years.
It's not our problem, right?
Excuse me,
But it did end up being our problem.
yeah.
So that is going to be at the October 11th Finance Committee meeting next week. And, I don't know how they'll wrangle with that, but there's not much that can be done. It is owed.
It is, and I will attend the meeting
Okay.
so that if they have any questions about exactly what this
Right.
is, that I can address that
Okay.
for the meeting if there's any questions
Okay.
for
Ha-
it.
Has Lance seen this then?
I don't know. I
Okay.
will I will double
I'll
check
talk to
with,
him.
okay.
Will you confirm with me what the numbers really are as far as
Oh,
what
yeah.
we were,
Yes.
we budgeted and what this increase is? And there's some point, if they continue to do this, where this committee probably needs to call them in and get an explanation,
Yeah, well,
you know?
they gave, Craig gave Jennifer the numbers of registered voters argument, and, I mean, they should have known it a long time ago, but if they, I mean, the fact that we didn't realize that's how they were doing the numbers, I guess we just kind of thought it was a flat fee or something, right?
It is a flat fee based on the number of registered voters you have, but we were never asked to submit numbers, so we just looked at it as they knew what our registered number of voters were, and they billed us accordingly. And so I guess at some point, they looked at our number of registered voters and realized that they had not been charging us correctly for our PYO. And so yeah, we never submit anything to them, but of course, because ES&S is the only vendor for election equipment, they have that information available through the Secretary of State's office. So at some point when they were doing billing, they would have taken a look to see, oh, here's Washington County's numbers. We've been undercharging you since you've been paying this. And so, but of course they didn't alert us
Right, ahead of
until
time.
they sent us the bill. And then it was a sticker shock when I opened it up, because I expected it to be what we had paid the previous year, because we were given no notice that it would be adjusted accordingly.
And they gave you the bill without giving you any explanation of why it was going up. You had to ask them.
Yes, and I didn't pay it for 6 months because they wouldn't ever give me an answer, or they said, oh, we've got to do this. And so I just kept telling the comptroller,
Yeah, don't
just
pay it.
hold on to
Right.
it. They didn't charge us any interest or anything like that, so I
That's
didn't pay any
good.
late
Yeah.
fees or anything by doing that. But I wanted him to give me
A reasonable answer.
a reasonable
Yeah.
answer. They'd also billed us on there too for a maintenance fee that we shouldn't be charged until the next year for our new poll books. And I was like, we're not paying that either. And so that was part of the reason why the bill
Well, that
was
was in
held up.
addition to this.
Oh yeah, I did get $5,000 knocked off of this originally. So yeah.
Remember, this is ES&S's mode of operation.
Well, another mode of operation for things like that, and this is my inquisitive side of me, is to put a little carrot in there that they can knock off and
Yeah.
make you happy.
Well, yeah, that's true, that happens. Okay, well, so that's next week. Any questions about that budget request? Any observations? Let's go on to poll worker notice for the November 8th general election.
So this is the notice that lists the poll workers, election night staff, my staff, the county clerk staff, both for the general election and the runoff election. And so this is just the list of everyone that will be working or has the potential to work.
Because you don't want to leave anybody off this list.
Right, right.
And I guess once we've published this, we can't add anybody.
No, we can. We can
Oh,
come
okay.
back. We do this just a touch early because normally it's strange the way this law is written. There's 1 week where the county clerk designates the early vote, her early vote crew, but obviously we run early vote too. And then there is a time for you to designate election day. We just do it all together because it doesn't make sense to have two
Right.
meetings for essentially the same document.
Okay.
And then this gets posted in the clerk's office on, not on the 17th, whatever that Monday is.
October 17th.
Yeah, October
Time
17th.
flies.
Yes.
Now, is that also published in the newspaper?
It is not,
Okay.
but the notice of election will be published in the newspaper on October the 16th, at a cost of $16,000, for the 2 Sundays. Yeah,
That just,
it hurts.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, it will be a 2-page, so it'll
Oh,
be
yeah.
2 pages in the retail section.
And twice.
It's about $8,000 each publication. So, and we're proofing it. We sent it off and then they sent it back to us. So we're
Oh,
proofing
good.
it this
Okay.
week.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you, sir. All right, let's move on to logic and accuracy certification for the election.
okay. So this is where we actually are testing
Right.
to make sure that a vote for candidate A is a vote for candidate A. And so this is the 0, and then there's the test, but we have multiple tests downstairs. We test each DS200 and then run separate tapes for those. This is, and then we actually have our poll book data, tested our poll book data. But if you'll see on this, each one of these columns, I've got a little handwritten note here, represents the first candidate listed, the 4th, the 2nd, and the 3rd candidate listed. So it makes it very easy, and we run those stacks in individual DS200s so that we can verify, because if you run them all in together, well, how do you know that the vote A is for vote A and not for vote B? And so that's how we do a verification of that.
That's a good check.
And we will, if you notice, this report is super long. Election night, when we do hand out results, what is it, 21 pages long, is the report. So we've got an extra printer downstairs, and I think what we're gonna do, because Debbie's printer that goes with her election night computer is pretty slow. So I think we're gonna export the results to a thumb drive, and then we'll
Print 'em
them on a,
downstairs.
no, we've got a small printer
Oh, you do?
that we'll bring up here to print, because 21 times, if there's 10
Yeah.
people in here, that's gonna be 210 sheets of paper.
This truncated.
Yes, we can go back in and correct
Okay.
those truncations, yeah.
Okay.
That's another thing that we look at when we do it as
Yeah.
well.
Oh, yeah, there's another one.
Yeah, there's quite a
Any
few.
name that's long is gonna get that going. Okay. All right, this looks like another, well, I'm just gonna pass that down. Looks like another place where we will be storing many, many, many sheets of paper.
5 boxes or
Oh.
more. No, we must have 6 or 7 boxes of ballots and reports and sheets down from the testing.
Wow,
So, yeah. So,
significant amount. How long do we save those for?
for 2 years.
Okay.
We run these on, for each, what do we run these? We run these on each, printer, machine? What-
DS200?
Yep, every DS200
Every
gets,
DS200?
yeah, gets ballots run through. And each express vote, we load the express vote and we vote a certain amount of ballots off of each express vote. Because we're vote centers, all of our sticks are burned exactly the same. So the first part is testing to make sure that we have everything lined up correctly, the appropriate precincts match to the appropriate districts and candidates. And then we go through and test that thoroughly. And then when we set up the equipment down at the South Campus to prepare to go out to the field, we make sure that we have the election loaded properly on every express vote. And we do that by voting a ballot off of every express vote. And then the DS-200 we load with the election as well. And we designate these ballots to go through a certain DS-200, and then we know what the results should be for that DS-200, and we make sure that it all matches when we run the tape. So,
Okay.
Pretty time-intensive process.
but it's, if you don't do this process, then there's no way for you to know until election day and people start saying, well, this isn't on here or this isn't in there. I mean, that doesn't mean that we might not miss something. The goal is to find your mistakes now. But it makes me know that I can accurately say to someone who asks me, how do I know that my vote counted?
You have confidence in the system because you've thoroughly
Yeah,
tested it.
complete confidence. So for instance, I had Debbie, every tape that's run from the machine, it shows the results. And Debbie runs the stick into the reporting computer. And I had her do it for each individual DS-200 that we tested for those particular ballots that were run through. And she's looking for a pattern, like we often vote the first candidate, so it makes it easy. And when she ran it through on one of the DS-200s, it showed a vote for the first candidate, but it also it showed there were, I think we ran 8 ballots through that machine to make sure it was counting, and it had 7 ballots for candidate 1 and then 1 ballot cast for candidate 2. So we go back and we pull the ballots out and we look and make sure that, yes, no, we voted, because we have to manually vote the ballots. We voted the ballot that way, and so the machine read it the way we had voted it. And so we go back through and don't just say, oh, well, we must have made a mistake on that. No, we go through, we dig the ballots out, we look, and we're like, oh, yes, we did make a mistake, and verify that that's exactly what it was.
The machine read it correctly.
The machine read it correctly. We voted incorrectly.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
There's always operator error.
yeah.
Okay, well, let's go on to vote center notices for the runoff on December the 6th.
Because we do vote centers, we do want to designate which vote centers are open for the runoff election, because obviously we don't want to open all 41 back up for a city of Farmington or city of West Fork. So all we're doing with these notices is designating that, so for instance, the city of Farmington mayor race, we would only open up Main Street Baptist Church if that's the only one. But if there's other ones open, it would be in addition to the ones that are open for that. So I have one for city of Farmington mayor, city of Springdale city council member Ward 3 position 1. For the city of Springdale, Temple Baptist Church was not available for us for the runoff election. So we will still, though, have 6 polling locations in the city of Springdale for the runoff election. State Representative District 9 has a 3-way race in it, but the only way we would have a runoff for that one is the top 2 ends in a tie. But you want to be prepared just in case.
Yeah.
And city of West Fork mayor, and then U.S. Senate and U.S. Congress, the same thing. Obviously, if those were to go to a runoff, the only way those go to a runoff too is the tie thing again, which, you know, shouldn't happen, but you don't want to, you know, think that it won't. I have this in here because we would open up all the polling locations except for Temple Baptist because it's not available for us. So these are just in case.
In case.
of.
We want to be prepared like good Boy Scouts.
Well, you have to designate polling locations 30 days before, and the election puts it at 29 days or 28 days. So it technically doesn't give you the proper amount of
Right.
time to wait for the election to be open to designate the polling locations.
And we hope none of these scenarios takes place, but we're prepared for it. Wow. Okay. We're closing in on the end of the year, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
My, oh my. Are we good?
We're good.
Okay, let's move on to assisted voter limit.
So there has been a stay in the overturning of the removal of the limit for individuals assisting voters. And so for this election, we will still have the documents that say there is a limit of 6 for individuals, and then track that information. So just for the commission to be aware of that. And I will have to retrain our supervisors who we trained, and then only to find out we did 3 days of supervisor training. Day 3 we had the stay, so supervisors from day 1 and day 2 will be sent notices that it's gone back. So
Well, that was how they were previously
Yes,
trained,
yes,
so at least
so-
we have that.
Yeah.
Okay, any
We'll
other
reset.
thoughts on that? All right, let's move on to election law changes for 2023. What do you got for us?
so
Is that what this is?
that's what this is. So this is something that the SBEC had asked for, and the way I approached this is more about what I see at the polling location and what kind of causes us difficulties when prepping for election and at our polling locations, that feedback that I get from my poll worker. So these are not, policy changes or anything like that, other than this would clean up some things that I think we see at the elections. Runoff elections, obviously, those, you have such a low voter turnout. And the SBEC had asked like 5 counties if we would submit our information, and almost all of us submitted the same information. Runoff elections, while unnecessary, I don't know if not eliminated, I feel like they should be pushed to 5 weeks instead of 4. And part of the reason for that is or you're going to have to change certain deadlines. So for instance, we had to sign notice of election for polling locations today when we don't know what polling locations need to be open. And then when we were trying to get our data for our poll books, the data for our poll books came in a lot slower. So there's a lot of things that, in that 4-week time period, sometimes can be more difficult for us to do. And so that was just some thoughts I had about the runoff elections.
So SBEC is gonna run this, you think?
No, they've asked from us, Pulaski County, Garland County and Miller County that they had asked the four of us if we would send in some thoughts. So I don't know what they're going to do with any of this information.
Oh, okay, so you don't know that they're spearheading
No,
anything
I
to go
don't.
forward?
So these might be some things that we may want to approach. The second one is, we changed the primary election between March and May. For a presidential year, it's in March. For a non-presidential year, it's in May. And
What was the reason for that? Do you know?
the SEC primary is what they called it because
It was nothing more than their way of making us relevant.
Making the election commission.
Arkansas relevant.
yes.
Because there were too many times that when we had the primary in May, that by that time, whoever was on the on the parent ballot had been decided.
Was it for 2016, the presidential election?
I'm thinking,
It
is that when it was?
It
Yeah.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
And they kept calling it the SEC
Yeah, that's
primary
right.
because it was like all the southern states
Yeah.
were holding
In
their
March, like, what was
primaries
it, the
in
second-
March.
Second
Yeah.
week in
Everybody
March.
shows to move up behind
Yeah.
Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah.
We
And
wouldn't want to.
It was part of that.
We wouldn't want to be irrelevant or anything, right?
So I think for consistency's sake, we should either keep it March or May rather than changing
Sure.
each year. And like I said, I approach this not from a political standpoint, but just kind of logistics of
Sure.
different things. We had a much harder time finding poll workers for the May election than we do
Right.
in March.
Yes.
And so that was one of the reasons I thought if we're going to stick in March. However, there are some issues with the election being held in March. Early vote is in February,
Yeah.
and we had elections where the courthouse was closed for early vote,
Yeah.
and deputies had to actually bring the county clerk's office in because the law does not allow for closure of
Right.
early vote. If you were to have had 8 polling locations open for early vote, we would not have been able to open all 8 of those sites because you cannot, that snowstorm was pretty significant that we had. And to ask our poll workers to drive in, for
In spite
2
of the fact that
votes.
there might not be any voters there.
Exactly. So I do think there needs to be cleanup in the law about clarification. If the courthouse closes, then you could close early vote. Election day is a completely different
Right,
thing. I would
right.
never advocate for like closing election day. But early vote, because you either have a 2-week or a 1-week time period, I do think that there could be room in the law to say that if the courthouse is closed, then you can close early voting for that day. I think just logistically, trying to get poll workers to polling locations and then putting their lives at risk to get there. So that was just something that we had needs, I thought, to be looked at. And then we have to post the list of every registered voter in the county at the polling location. This is a very old law that's been around, back when you did precinct-based voting and you had smaller numbers of registered voters. I think this is an unnecessary cost and unnecessary time, especially because if someone is wanting to look for voters, it's easily accessible through the clerk's office or voter view as well. That was one thing I thought would,
Yeah, we should, that seems like an easy one. They should
Yeah.
get rid of that law.
Yeah.
It's an old law. Nobody goes to our polls and looks up,
Right.
the list of registered voters.
No.
It doesn't work that way anymore with technology.
it doesn't, no.
Right.
And then this, like I said, was a long shot. The unopposed candidates, the back and forth about being on the ballot, not being on the
Right.
ballot, it's very inconsistent between the primary and the general election of who is listed and who's not. The same thing with school and nonpartisan. I really think, you know, for building a ballot, if you only have the candidates that are required to be on the ballot for petitions numbers
Right.
or for races, I think, you know, cleans up everything, and then there's no inconsistency.
Right.
You know, so because for instance, for the primary election, unopposed JPs were required to be on the ballot. But for the general election, unopposed JPs are not required to be on the ballot. And so it it makes it very, you know, difficult between elections who goes on and who doesn't go on, and I think it, you know, can be confusing. School millage, I'll always add the school millage if it's not being, you know, changed.
Yeah.
We still have to have it on there. It is in the Constitution. That one, I just,
Right. Well,
Don't
and the
think
fact
we'll
that it's
get
in the
anywhere, but-
Constitution is,
um,
it's not important enough to make that change as far as
right,
the
right. It, you know, it's kind of a difficult
particular
one.
people
Um,
concerned.
And then I've talked in here just a little bit about the recount procedures, because I know there's been talk about like automatic recount triggers. You know, if a race is within 1%, 5%, just how that would work and how that would look. And so, especially because you are a vote center county, and most counties are. If you're looking at one particular race, we had to count a ballot box for an undervote in the recount that we did.
Wow.
And so, you know, I think you just want to look at the mechanics of that. Also, if you are looking at having to do some type of trigger recount, if that's something that proceeds, and you're working towards a runoff election, that's where a 5-week rather than a 4-week
Right.
runoff
Yeah,
election
good point.
would be beneficial. Absentee ballots and designated bearers, that whole law, the way it's been written about setting them aside as provisional, but they're technically counting, but we're just setting them aside because there was one name on one sheet and, you know, a different name on the voter statement. But it's still countable, you know. I think that for our canvassers, it's very confusing.
Oh, yeah.
For us, it's very confusing. I have to look it up every time. So I do think that there's an area there that needs to be cleaned up. Accepting out-of-state driver's license for approved photo ID. This one, as states move to, and pretty soon we'll all be required to have the, what is it called? Enhanced
Oh, yeah.
enhanced driver's license.
Yeah.
You know, and if every state is having an enhanced driver's license, maybe that's something that we could start to look at accepting out-of-state driver's license. Those voters are still registered to vote here.
Yeah.
They just haven't updated their driver's license yet. And we get a lot of voters, you know, from Texas, Missouri, Mississippi, who are moving to this area. And when they show that ID, even though they're registered to vote, they have to vote a provisional or go home and get their passport or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So I do think as the, you know, United States moves towards enhanced driver's license, maybe that's something to be looked at.
Yeah.
I know that that's an issue we see at the polls. And then the transferring of voter registration between counties. This creates if you're registered to vote in Benton County and you move to Washington County, you have 4 days before the election to change your voter registration. And if you don't do that, you're not eligible to vote in either county, but you are a registered voter in the state. And I think with the way the advancements in our poll books, the advancement in the fact that the counties have more capability to track where the voters are, county clerks might disagree with me on this, but I do think that a lot of the provisional ballots that we end up rejecting for voters who aren't registered to vote, they're actually just registered to vote in a neighboring county. And we're not able to count their ballots. So maybe you set it up where they still vote a provisional, but if we can go in and look to see that they didn't vote in the county they were registered in, then we maybe could count their vote. I have always thought that should be something to maybe look at.
Yeah, I completely agree. People move between Benton and Washington counties all the time. And they may have even sent some form in to the Secretary of State's office that didn't get changed over in time. I mean, there are a lot of ways that happens. So, yeah, they're registered voters in the state. They still have to follow all the requirements to show ID and the rest of it. Technology solved that issue. Could have solved it.
Right.
We just need a change in the law. Yeah, I agree.
So that's one we see when I look back at numbers. You know, as much as I hate to add more paperwork, but when people rent a house, lease, buy a house, mortgage brokers, if they would fill out voter registration cards, then we wouldn't have all the address changes that we see at the polls on election day. And it would just speed up the process, make things, you know, easier. And so, I mean, obviously you can't require someone to register to vote, but if it's part of the paperwork, you know, that would assist, and that would also assist in voters moving between counties.
Right.
So, and then the DMV, of course, is an issue, as always. And then, of course, the write-in candidates that we've talked about, that they should only have to, if they're filing for a state office, they should only have to file with the state. If they're filing for a county office, they should file with the county, and it should be the county clerk's office. The election commission should not be an office that you file any paperwork with. Because an argument could be made that, you know, because we have there was a write-in candidate for attorney general. But all the counties I've talked to, no one received any paperwork. And maybe they mailed it to your house and you didn't recognize the name or thought it was junk, and so it got thrown in the trash. And so who knows? Sending something to your home should not be a form of filing to be on the ballot.
And there is confusion when they think that is part of the official way to get that write-in name on the ballot. And it's kind of odd that would be the presumption, but it is.
I mean, 9, 10, and 11, the big one, rather than having those three, you know, changing the data transfer between counties, requiring lease agreements to have it, and the DMV issue, you could eliminate all three of those if you allowed online voter registration and online change of address. Because you still have to hand in a form or send in a form. So to me, that's the big one that would eliminate some of these other issues, other points that are trying to get at that issue. Really, that's the heart of it.
Okay, well, one of the reasons why I suggested we discuss this now is because after November, that's not enough time to get this to our legislators and to begin to get that ball rolling, because they're going to start, January 15th?
I would
20th?
say as soon as they're elected, they will start in December.
Okay, yeah, true.
Putting together stuff to be filed.
So how would you like to forward that with the legislators in our area? And maybe light a fire under them as far as the way some of that could be done.
Yeah, good question. I mean, if the state were to allow online voter registration, it would. I don't recall the past efforts at it, or if it's ever.
There were some 2 years ago.
Yeah, there were a couple. I don't remember
remember
exactly
what
how that
happened.
was. You know what the bill was, or I mean, it would require a constitutional change. Jennifer, is that right?
Would it?
No, it didn't seem to. They filed several bills,
Maybe
and
it wouldn't.
I don't
I'll
think
have
any
to
of them.
look and
Yeah.
see. Tom, you don't remember, do you? Off the top of your
But you know more about the legal process involved there and how if 9, 10, and 11 could be
Yeah.
piled into one, how that would work, and maybe just get that ball sort of rolling. Because, I mean, that's going to require some time.
Yeah.
And it's going to require some conversations back and forth among some of the legislators, I think, to get a bill that is going to satisfy the different parties
Yeah.
involved.
Our voter registration process is just so archaic,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Filling out a
Right.
paper form. and
Which may or
turning
may
it in.
not get turned in.
Yeah, and
Or
those paper
mailed.
forms, then the information is then entered electronically
Right.
every time,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
So you have so much work behind the scenes that goes into that process.
Mm-hmm.
People having to transcribe that information from the form into a system
Right.
and then convey it, from the state to the counties.
Yeah.
It's a
And presume that when they've input, it's all been input correctly.
exactly 'cause-
Which, if you're looking at a voter registration form, is sometimes not very clearly
Yeah.
written.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's a number of ways in which that can go awry.
Yeah, definitely. And we see it go awry.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we see folks who re-register or change addresses and it's sent to the wrong county, right?
Yeah.
And then they show
Yeah.
up in a different county.
Right.
It would, it would, I think, improve our voter rolls because people would update their addresses more often.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
doing the work to go in and update it. They're the ones going between counties. I mean, it's less work for the county clerk, less work for the Secretary of State, and it's more accurate.
So I have a
Voter
question.
Other states do it.
Do they?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there's a segue here based on what you said about the county clerks and the secretaries of state. Why aren't they pushing this in Arkansas? Why aren't we talking to them? Well, what about our clerk? What about Becky? What does she think about it? What about what does the SBEC say about it? What does the county clerk group that the
Association.
the association that the legislators pay attention to? They do pay attention.
I know they do.
Why aren't they talking about it?
Yeah.
Where's the push from below to make this happen?
I mean, this is where it is. You assume that everybody else is proactive in trying to improve the
Not
process. It's
assuming.
through that question. I mean, I would like to think that everyone else is looking at elections and constantly thinking about how to improve the process and
yeah.
all of it. But I feel like we're the ones who really are the
But,
ones doing it.
To be fair, there were some legislators last session who did really try to move this forward, and I don't remember where the bottleneck was.
I don't remember.
But I know that
either.
it died somewhere.
Yeah, I remember that too. I mean, you referenced the last meeting, Renee, when folks registered on that online link, remember?
Yes,
Registered
that's
to vote
right, yes.
Online in Arkansas.
Because they presumed that was the correct link.
Exactly. And I don't know who had that effort or what it
I don't
was.
either.
My understanding wasn't it was some malicious thing to try to get people to do it. They just
Yeah.
thought Arkansas had to register online like
Right.
other places
Right.
might have.
Yeah, that was probably a big part of it, well, our state is finally
Yeah.
doing this, and wrong.
Yep.
So.
Well, yes, I'm happy to look at it and see. I'll have to refresh myself from
Yeah,
a legal perspective what the process is here and exactly what needs to be
Yeah,
changed.
and I mean,
'Cause
again,
I haven't looked at it.
I think we need to,
Recently.
if there are things that we need to get done, or we would like to see done, whether it's cleanup or a change that is what we think is a good change, we need to start pushing our legislators now with ideas to get the bills that they will need to have written. And we can't do that January 1st because they've already begun to submit legislation by that time, submit bills that they want approved. So the sooner we get on this, I think the better. Jim, do you have anything in particular that?
No, I haven't had the opportunity to hear this and read through this briefly. I would like to have the opportunity to take this home with me and maybe try to look at it in the next meeting that we have another conversation about it if we
Okay.
can.
Yeah, I mean, we can
I
continue
agree. We need
to
some
have
time to think about it
conversations about this
think about
between
other
now and the
issues.
end of the year.
And I'll go back and look and see if I can find emails, comments about the online voter registration from, because they
good.
actively
Yeah.
worked on that in
Somebody-
2021.
That would be good to
File
have.
the bill,
And I'll
yeah.
look to see if I can find that, and I'll find the bills, because I know I have the bills saved. I know one of the concerns was the signature. If people register to vote online, how do we get the signature? I know that was, I
We
know, I
don't ever
remember
use the
that one.
signature now from the voter registration, do we?
No,
we don't
we don't.
ever
That's
use
true.
it
Our
for-
poll
Yeah.
workers
for
don't,
any-
no.
For
Yeah.
any purpose. We
No.
don't.
No.
Yeah.
The only time we've ever looked at the signature is sometimes if someone has been marked as voted, we go back to look to see if we can compare that signature in the poll book to the signature from when they registered to vote. But that is a rare instance.
Yeah, because
That
when we're
we do
looking at
that.
absentee ballots, we're looking at the voter statement.
For
Exactly.
absentee ballots, that's
Exactly.
completely,
Request, yeah,
yeah, that's completely different.
That's a separate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The signature, verification, I mean, confirming somebody is who they are based on the signature is a really old,
It's a
archaic,
stretch. Yeah. Yeah.
requirement. We have social securities now, we have driver's license numbers, and we have
Right.
date of births.
Right.
We have
Mhm.
things to verify
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah, true.
is somebody who's properly registered to vote. Jim, yeah, your question earlier was a good one. Why haven't other people done the online voter registration? I think it's thinking about it more. I think it's Arkansas's not always on the forefront of
Right.
technology changes or adopting some of these things. I think that's part of it. I hate to say this. I suspect some of it's probably political. Some people probably don't necessarily want to make it easy for everybody to vote and to change it. I don't know. But also, I just suspect that may be the case, because if otherwise a bill's introduced in the legislature, if there wasn't politics behind it, it would pass. But then the other one that I suspect we will hear is to create or adopt that type of a system, there would be a technological cost to buy the software.
Yes.
So I suspect that is probably some of the pushback too,
In-
that there would be a cost, right,
In my
to have that kind of system.
In my recollection, I think that part of the reason, and you may remember this or not, but I feel like part of the reason was the state was simply not geared up technologically to make a system that was going to work well. And rather than piecemeal it, it was, we're gonna have to pull this back and rethink. I'm not certain about that, but I feel like there was some kind of a technological doubt that we don't have this all together yet. And so it was pulled.
A lot of conjecture on our part going on
Yes,
right now. And,
yeah.
I could say that, there's a lot of questions by some people about trust of the electronic systems.
Oh, that's a good
They
point.
already have
yeah.
distrust of electronic voting systems. Why are they gonna trust an electronic system to register?
Registration, yeah.
It's funny because it's a piece of paper you turn in, but that piece of paper then is entered electronically.
I understand,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
So we can't answer those questions.
Right.
There's a little thing called question to the void. We have no capability at this
Yeah,
table
that's
to
true.
question to the void on this issue. That you've got to have more availability of data. You got to know what the Secretary of State's office is thinking. You've got to know what the clerks are thinking and their group. You got to know so much about it, and you got to know what was talked about the last time. and
I'll
why
look
it
that
dropped.
up.
Right.
You got to know what the states that are doing it, what did they find, what's happened, how has it improved, has it done the things that they wanted
That's a
it
good
to
question.
do? You know, there's a lot of information that has to be looked into. We're not really
Yeah, we're,
in a position to do all of that. I would love to think that we could influence somebody to do it. I'm not sure who the right, what group is the right group to do it, but I think it deserves to be questioned, it deserves to be looked at, and we deserve to make an informed decision on it as we move forward. And
well, and of
I'll
course,
get off
we,
my.
we're not in a position to make a decision, but
Yeah.
we can encourage
Right.
our legislators that this is something we'd really like to see, or maybe not see, but
Yeah,
give them the impetus that, hey, we're looking at this, because it would simplify some
I
things
think that's exactly right.
across the state.
That's exactly right, Renee. We can point out the issues that we have and how much they cost and how much they create problems. And we could say, look, somebody needs to do something to improve this situation.
Somebody.
Perhaps online registration would help this. You know, perhaps saving these costs would pay for the, upgrade of equipment to do it
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
But that's the type of thing that takes a lot of information and a lot of decisions.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the whole point in moving forward with, hey, these are the things we'd like to see the legislature next year begin to process on, as far as our point of view. And there may be other things that ought to be on this list, but let's spend some time thinking about them, discussing them, maybe talking with some of the legislators in that regard.
Let me say this, I'm not sitting here as an opponent to this. I'm neutral on it. I think as a 75-year-old who has young men that are my sons who have taught me a lot about electronics, I feel like I'm open to this kind of conversation. I think it's worth looking at.
Yeah, all fair. Everything is going online, even the DMV, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the
You can register a
DMV
new
should.
vehicle
I've been.
online. I have before. You still have to send in some paperwork.
Right,
Most of the
right.
process is entered
Yeah.
online.
And I'm renewing my registration online. I'm
Yeah.
doing it for 2 years at a time.
Everything's done online.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a rarity.
Well-
you have to mail anything in.
True.
You know,
Nowadays.
if you can check your voter registration on Voter View,
Yes.
it would be reasonable, in my view, to at least be able to change your address
Completely agree.
on the Voter View site in some way.
It's a great observation, Renee, because you can with literally any other function, whether it's a bank account
Yes.
and your address, or it's, a mortgage payment. I
Right.
mean, anything.
Right.
All
But-
sorts of other secure things
But maybe
online.
this-
You can change that info.
Maybe this
It's
could
basic
be
info.
incremental. I don't know. Would SOS is who runs Voter View, right?
Yeah.
So it might be an internal SOS change rather than a legislative change. I don't know.
I think the address change would have to be a legislative change.
Okay.
Like
It's
if
a-
you wanted to start small, I still think address change would have to be a legislative change, but that would be a
It would be a
Yeah,
start.
good
big
small
change.
step.
Yeah.
It's a great point, Renee, that if there's the ability on that system to have an incremental step where you could change an address,
Right.
that's a great first step.
It's a start.
Or, I mean, with the address, of course, the county Because
Yes,
then you don't have
yes.
to change between counties.
Right.
It would resolve, a couple of these issues that we encounter every time. People who show up to who were registered to vote.
Right.
And they show up to vote, but they moved
Yeah.
and just forgot to update
You're
their
already
registration.
registered to vote. You've confirmed it on
Yep.
voter view.
You still have to show an ID at the polls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Jennifer, could you ask the Secretary of State just to see if their system allows that sort of
Yeah,
capability?
that's a good question. Yeah.
Good
Just
question.
to know, because it's a good thought if you could incrementally even do it.
Yeah.
That may be a first step type thing to shoot for. I don't know.
And that would be a huge move forward, I think. But,
I agree.
let's get more information on it, and let's keep thinking about things that really we want to have our legislators pursue in
I think this is
in
great.
this
Thank you for
winter.
initiating this
Yeah.
for us to look at it.
I agree. And I agree with looking at it all now. And on this, for us to not take a victory lap, but Jennifer, so a few years ago, we had a bill passed that allowed high school students to start working and become poll workers and do the things that poll workers do, right? And we had local representatives sponsor a bipartisan bill, and that passed. And now for this election cycle, how many high schoolers did we train?
140 high schoolers.
Right.
Which is awesome.
It is.
And we were able to do that because we thought about these issues, and then
Right.
we were proactive in asking
Yeah.
some representatives to
Yeah.
draft,
Get
sponsor,
going.
and then pass a bill. And now we've
Right.
got 140 high schoolers trained to help with this election, which is great.
And it was a seemingly small effort put into something that is quite effective in terms of getting some numbers that we just didn't have before.
Well, and especially for our Springdale sites and our areas where we have bilingual students
Yes.
who can now act as poll workers. And in the past, that limit of 6, those students would have been limited to assisting 6 voters. But now, since they've actually attended training, they're treated as poll workers, they can assist unlimited numbers of voters that come in. And so that allows us to have bilingual poll workers at all of our Springdale sites and Marshallese. There's a handful of Marshallese students as well who can assist, unlimited numbers. So, yeah.
And
Yeah,
all of
that's
those 140 students are way more likely to be involved in the civic process and for their
Right,
whole lives, right? If they start
You
participating
hope.
in elections.
More likely.
You do hope, but I think there's a
Yeah.
much better chance.
I agree.
So anyway, I think that's great.
All right, well, let's continue to think about other things that we need to add to this list and maybe even, I don't know, combine or find a way to discuss it with some legislators. And maybe we'll be a little bit farther ahead of things when January comes. Okay, voter information. Jennifer has one more meeting to go.
Yeah, that'll be on the 19th, and it'll be here, and it's basically answering questions about how do you trust the election process, pretty much is what that class is, so.
I don't know if y'all saw or heard, Jennifer was on KUAF.
Yeah.
Podcast for an hour. If you have a chance, or maybe it was longer than an hour.
I feel like it was a little bit longer than that.
If you have a chance to listen to it, do. She did an excellent, not that we didn't expect her to, an excellent job. It was, I think, from my perspective, it was well received. People thought it was greatly informative. The small audience that was there, they asked questions afterwards. So she fielded a number of questions. I forget what it's called, election something or
Vote
another.
natural or something through KUAF.
Yeah,
It's
it
a
was
program they have.
KUAF, and it looks like they may have a natural election. That's
Yeah.
what it's called. Look, if you want to go on your podcast, look for natural election, and it's right there.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
It's
That's
very
great.
good.
Yeah, that's great.
Very good. And,
Good for you, that's great.
I mean, if you had an opportunity to do that every week, I think maybe we'd get really informed electors. Anyway, other business, guys.
I saw something online, one of the counties, maybe Faulkner, I'm not sure. Anyway, it, basically, there was a concern about the elections getting, well, stretched out because, at the polls, because the, voters' time to vote might time out because of these lengthy things to read. You know, like that.
Issue 4.
Issue 4.
Yeah.
You know, is that something that we've thought about? Is it something that we were concerned about?
So we do know that the new software does time out
that's
the
right,
express
yeah.
vote if you're not actively voting. So if voters do sit there for any length of time, eventually they get a message on the express vote that says that your session has timed out, and you have to return the ballot and they have to start all over again. So we've done a couple of things. One, we always will have sample ballots at the polling location, but we're going to print multiple copies of the issues to have available for voters to read, maybe while they're waiting in line. We also have the issues now translated into Spanish, which that was a big concern for my translators who worried about having to read it off of the express vote to them. And so this way we can give it to them in Spanish. But yeah, it is an issue that we saw in the primary 1 or 2 times. But as we've been doing training here and I've just been demonstrating the express vote and how it's worked, it's timed out on me a couple of times, but I probably talk a lot.
How long is the timeout?
So it's close to 10 minutes. Yeah.
10 minutes.
Which is already past what, I mean, in the law, doesn't it have a specific time that it
10
suggests?
minutes.
It's 10 minutes, okay. I was thinking it was shorter than
Yeah.
that.
But I do think, Jim, that concern is very real concern. And so I think probably what we'll do is definitely have multiple copies of the issues pre-printed, not just in the sample ballot book, but available for voters to be looking at as they're waiting in line.
You're hoping that they're not waiting in line, but if they are.
Well, yes, but if they are.
So wait, 10 minutes to vote the ballot, or that thing times out, or it's
You
10
said
minutes
if
just to
they're
stay on one
not
screen?
I think if they're not active, I think
No,
that.
from the last time they enter something,
Yeah.
they got 10 more minutes.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Well,
I can't imagine it taking anybody 10 minutes then to not be active and touch
I
the
have
screen.
tried to read that issue 4.
Ah?
I'm sure I understand why it even had to take that much room.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? It's either yay
but
or nay.
we'll actually this afternoon when we've got class, we'll actually time it,
Okay.
and I'll have a
And-
definitive answer for you on that next week.
And do
So,
this,
yeah.
every so often, touch the screen, because that may be the active thing that you need in order to extend that
Yeah.
10 minutes. But if it's just a straight, you go to the next page and you're gonna wait for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That just seems like a bad idea.
Yeah.
But touch the screen.
Yeah,
see if
we'll
that extends
experiment this afternoon,
Okay, good.
and we'll have a definitive answer for you on
Wow.
it. But yeah, I did notice yesterday it timed out on me while I was teaching class. So
Maybe if you hit the back button and then go forward again.
You could do that
Starts
even,
over.
yeah. Oh, my goodness. We gotta outsmart these machines, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay, upcoming meeting dates. We have a meeting next week on reimbursements. We're gonna get this reimbursement for the primary behind you sooner or later,
yes,
Jennifer.
I have it. I just need to print and just go through. But I have $170,000 that I'm seeking reimbursement for the primary, and close to $50,000 for the runoff. So.
Okay. You all are aware of Tanya's husband and
Yeah, I saw that.
keep her in your prayers. Do we have any other business? Anyone? We are adjourned. Thank you all.